Good evening. Welcome to the Planning Board meeting in the Town of Islip for Wednesday, January 4th, 2023. Just a couple of housekeeping items, then we'll start the meeting. I guess first we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. There are 5 items on the agenda tonight that are adjourned. They are item 1, let me make this quicker, Corey Elbaum, Vice President, SP 2022-0030. Item number 2, 1056 Motor Parkway Associates LLC, PB 2022-029. Item number 4, Bola EM Realty LLC, PB 2022-009. Item 6, BSL East Islip LLC, CZ 2022-018. And lastly, item number 7, Transform Bohemia New York LLC, CZ 2022-010. Remind applicants, please keep your presentations to 30 minutes or less. And remind those who are here to speak from the community to please fill out a yellow card in the back and hand it up front, and to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. First item on the agenda, Town Board application public hearing, Expressway 55 Car Wash, Tommy Federico, CZ 2022-032. West side of Motor Parkway, County Route 67, approximately 154 feet south of Long Island Expressway South Service Road, State Route 454, Brentwood 800 Motor Parkway. Applicant requests a modification of covenants and restrictions associated with TC number 3892 to permit more than one curb cut onto Motor Parkway. Good evening.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman. Forgive me, I thought I was number 3, so I just have to collect my thoughts and my breath and comb my hair. Get there. I could just hand up one letter for the record. I'm not sure if the board has it or not. Mailings. And I did just have a business card for the court reporter. Forgive me. Steve Bertolino for the applicant, 130 West Main Street, East Islip, New York. Good evening, members of the board, Mr. Chairman. As you just read, this is 800 Motor Parkway in Brentwood. This is just south of the LIE South Service Road, I guess on the first Motor Parkway, or the westerly Motor Parkway, if you will. It's currently used as known as Expressway 55 Car Wash. As you can imagine, it's a car wash. It's been there since 1991. The current applicant was partners with Joe Zangi, who made the application back in 91. That approved site plan, which was granted covenants and restrictions for a change of zone from residence AA to business 3, included one curb cut. So here we are 30 years later, and apparently during construction, 2 curb cuts were put in on the county road on Motor Parkway. In 1995, the county closed out the bond and the road improvement. They were satisfied with what was there. And what I just handed up to the board was a letter dated April 7th, 2022, which indicates that the county is satisfied with the current configuration, and they are not asking that it go back to 1 curb cut. I don't think it ever was 1 curb cut. I think it's always been 2. That being said, we've been operating continuously since about 1992-93. We've had no violations, complaints, incident, or accidents, to our knowledge, on the site. The car wash was generally granted an approval with 7 parking spots, and that was with 4 being utilized and 3 being land banked. I stand before you today with a new site plan being revised to show 5 proposed parking spaces with 1 land bank. We will have 6 total. That's 1 ADA and the 1 land bank. The current code requires queuing for the cars of 12 entering the car wash, and we do meet that portion of the code. There will be no structural or site plan changes, if you will, on the structural side, but there will be some striping to the parking areas along the easterly side of the building to allow for that employee parking. Other than that, I don't have much more. If the board has any questions, I thought it was a pretty light application, if you will, and I don't want to take more time than necessary.
Thank you. I don't have any cards. Anyone wants to speak? Is anyone here wish to be heard? Not seeing anyone, I'm going to turn to Mr. Colgan for a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As stated by Mr. Bertolino, this application proposes to modify covenants and restrictions for an existing car wash to allow a second curb cut to exist on Motor Parkway. The subject had been the subject of a change of zone to Business 3 and a town board special permit back in 1991. The applicant installed the second curb cut without modifying the covenants first, and apparently the site plan as well. Additional covenants required the owner to make a good faith effort for cross-access with neighboring properties, maintain a natural area not to be cleared, otherwise face a $10 square foot fine, and provide enough stacking for 20 vehicles. The natural area referred to in the existing covenants has been cleared in its entirety. 4 parking spaces were required on the eastern portion of the site, but now the applicant proposes 3 in one of the existing queuing lanes in front of the car wash. Cross-access or shared parking is optimal, as there isn't enough room for employee parking and provide the additional queuing that had been requested in the original change of zone. It's noted that this car wash has existed for many, many years with no known complaints, at least to the planning staff. But given that we don't know definitively where the parking can go for the use, and we're acknowledging that there's obviously some employees here, we don't know where they're parking right now. And we did have initial conversations with the applicant's team that perhaps the gas station might have an interest in the car wash site. It might warrant looking into formalizing a shared parking agreement so we can be assured that employees do have places to park without compromising the site circulation and continue with the operation of the site. So the staff would be in favor of reserving the application tonight just to go over these concerns, but we'll leave it up to the board.
Thank you. So I guess to the first point, Mr. Bertolino, can we just speak about the natural area that's been cleared on the eastern part of the property? Is that what you're saying?
To my understanding, that's being restored.
Okay, so that,
Yeah, there's, on the eastern side, there's one land bank parcel that's going into that little, there's like a little triangle in there.
okay, so that,
If I'm speaking to the same area that Mr. Colgan's referring to.
okay. And then in terms of just looking at this now, there's enough room to stack 20 vehicles now on property.
Well, it's 12. I think the current code requires 12. I do believe the prior application had asked for 20, but the current code requires 12, and we do meet that that 12. I think the prior with 20, there was like a dual lane, if you will, and now we're taking away that dual lane and creating the employee parking there. And while I'm on that note, maybe I can address the second concern.
Well, before you go to that, because that's going to be my next concern, just to Mr. Colgan, I know we have 20 in your report. He's saying 12.
So in the land development regulations, 12 is the requirement. When this was contemplated, the town board required 20. That's what's in the covenants.
So we need to change the covenants.
Yeah, that covenant would need to be changed as well.
And the planning staff is fine with 12 meeting the requirement or no?
It's a little tight. We're always preferred to have a little more wiggle room. And if that can be accomplished, again, balancing the need for parking as well as the need for additional queuing because of the awkward configuration of the site, it would be preferable that we have more than the 12 cars just in case. But again, that's something we could work on with the applicant.
I guess that leads into the next question, Mr. Bertolino, which is I think to accommodate the parking, we might have lost some of that. And I know Mr.
Yeah,
Colgan
like-
spoke about cross-access. Can you address those?
Yes, so like I had said, originally that entry lane, if you will, as you come in, was split into 2 lanes, and that's where we got the 20 to accommodate the employee parking there without asking for relaxation into the front yard landscaping or grass area. We take away some queuing, and we gain we lose the 20, but down to 12, and we still meet the code there. And I'd just like to point out that's pretty much what's been happening for the last 3 decades. There's really been no issue that we've seen. With respect to the cross-access or parking, so most of the employees, there's not many employees. Most of the employees that do park don't even park on site. They park in an office building to the west. So my understanding is there's an informal agreement. The owner of that building, his name is Wayne Steck, and I had inquired if there was a written agreement. I'm told that there is not. The informal agreement is Wayne gets his car washed for free. And I said, well, what happens when he sells the building? And I said, well, the next guy gets his car washed for free. If anyone's familiar with that office building, and I think it might be 5500 or 2500 Express Drive South, it's a very big office building. It's got a tremendous parking lot. And to the south of the building is really behind our site. Nobody ever parks there. I'm there for legal business on many occasions throughout the year, and it's never been an issue. So it's an informal agreement. With respect to Mr. Colgan's comment with the gas station next door, we've been trying to avoid the gas station next door. There's been some talk about trying to sell the car wash to the gas station next door, but they won't commit, and kind of a negotiating thing. They won't commit to the sale, and they won't give us the access agreement. So, we're kind of stuck where we can't go to the car wash as Mr. Colgan would like, and I spoke to Mr. Colgan about this personally. With respect to the office building, we don't have the same issue, and we have plenty of parking in that office building that we've been using for years, and it's informal.
And they refuse to make it formal, is what you're saying?
Yeah, I've asked that question, and if it's forced, I don't know that we could, and this as well as I do. I don't know you can ever force an adjoining property owner unless it's in their covenant.
I'm not asking you to. I'm just asking if there's been discussions about making it a formal agreement.
Yeah, there have been discussions, and it's been like, no, we're good with the way it is. Nobody wants to do it. Now, when I say nobody, I have to infer that that's the adjoining property owner. Like, why burden their parcel with that? And it's been the same thing with the gas station. They don't want to burden their parcel with our problem. Although they allow us to do it now, it's just, a handshake and clean my car every couple of weeks when I come through.
I guess the concern is, like you brought up yourself, is when Mr. Steck leaves, if the new person comes in and says no, then where are those cars going?
Right, but again, we don't have, this is the car wash. There's not many employees there that park. We don't have customers that park. I'm sure if anybody here on the board's been through a car wash, you pull in, you get online, depending on the type of car wash, your car goes through and you get in and you leave. There's really no on-site parking. Nobody's standing there to buy, an item except when the car's going through. And that's all in the queuing. Beyond that, you have 4 or 5 employees that come to work to operate the thing. And we're providing for the 5 spaces and 6 with the ADA.
Thank you. Further questions from the board? Anything further from the applicant?
Nothing, thank you.
Is there a motion? Mr. Moriarty?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'd make a motion to close the public hearing this evening and reserve decision to allow staff and the applicant to work out these parking issues.
Thank you. There's a motion by Mr. Moriarty to close the public hearing and reserve decision. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Cruz. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? We're reserved. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy New Year. Good
Happy New
night.
Year. Next item on the agenda, D&G Realty Ventures LLC, CZ 2022-024, north side of Union Boulevard, County Route 50 between 2nd and 3rd Avenue, Bayshore, number 46-52 2nd Avenue, 55-63 3rd Avenue, and 1779-1805 Union Boulevard. Applicant requests a change of zone from Business District, Business 3 District, and Industrial 1 District to All Downtown Development District in order to construct a mixed-use building consisting of 14,000 square feet of commercial space and 132 senior apartments and an apartment house consisting of 24 non-age-restricted apartments. Site plan modifications are required as part of this application. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Happy New Year. My name is Larry Gargano, Principal D&G Realty, here for the project application. There's a handout that's being distributed showing updated renderings for the proposed project. I'm not sure if that was included in your current pamphlet.
Thank
you. So by way of overview, this project, this proposed application was presented through public hearing back in October 2022 for the redevelopment of approximately 5.5 acres located on the north side of Union Boulevard, starting on 2nd Avenue, starting on 3rd and running east to 2nd Avenue. On the 2nd Avenue street frontage, we run back to the railroad tracks. On the 3rd Avenue, we run back to the railroad tracks north, and on 2nd Avenue, we continue north for the first 4 homes on 2nd Avenue. The project is, the property is a conglomeration of sites, which includes some small business, mixed-use apartment houses, not illegal, but 2-family homes, and a large site for being used for outdoor storage and manufacturing and industrial use for a fencing company. For the most part, from end to end of the property, the buildings and structures are somewhat in deteriorated state. Uh, The fencing company has large storage spaces and accumulated materials throughout the site, and it's a very active construction delivery depot yard with trucks going in and out during normal working hours to supply the fencing operation. The surrounding homes have a number of multifamily uses for rental tenants. And this parcel is what we would consider to be an ideal site for redevelopment. And with that in mind, looking at the downtown development district zoning in which this property sits, as in the overlay district, we felt it was an ideal application, meets all the criteria under the downtown development district legislative intent. So we presented this to the board in October. There was no public comment at the public hearing, and the majority of the discussion at that time with the board was concerning the overall architecture of the building. At the time the building presented, the feeling was that it was a little bit too urban looking based on its materials. Mr. Bruno, who kind of led that conversation, we went back with the architect and we came up with some ideal elevations and materials that we felt addressed those comments. That is for the main building. For the secondary building on Second Avenue, there was also some concerns brought up by Ms. Cruz concerning the more or less urban look of that type of product. So we went back and we did all of those elevations to create a much more residential feel. The overall site plan and densities have not changed. So we're basically here tonight to respond to the comments that came out of the board and represent revised elevations, which have been circulated to the Bayshore Chamber of Commerce, and they are pleased with the proposed changes. We are very pleased with it, and we think the application has tremendous merit and provides a tremendous amount of benefits to the downtown area. We understand that there are other things of concern when applications of this type get brought before the board. It's not just about architecture. We do feel that the architecture really will greatly enhance the Union Boulevard corridor, which has largely been ignored for many, many years as development has been taking place around in the downtown Bayshore area. The Union Boulevard corridor has kind of been staying as is, and quite frankly, as a resident of Bayshore, it's not very attractive in my opinion. This gives a tremendous opportunity to enhance the Bayshore portion of the Union Boulevard corridor. If the intent of future applications and in consideration of this current application, if the intent is to be concerned about parking and traffic movements in and around the downtown area, this project provides a positive impact to that equation based on the other potential uses under the current zoning, which is B1, B3, and industrial. We've done yield studies that indicate a large office medical building could be put on the property, which would generate far more trip traffics than this one would. If the intent of supporting zoning in the downtown Bayshore area is to strengthen the main street and strengthen the stores and restaurants and other retail operations, this project again provides support for those initiatives. The more residential foot traffic that is in and around a downtown area, the more strength you will have for that downtown business. One notable difference between this proposed project and some of the other ones that have been recently built or currently underway or are going to be underway shortly is that this one is being proposed as a 55 and older. We think this is a underserved market for the downtown area. There's recently been one developed which was under an affordable housing program. We believe that there's much more room for market rate of senior housing as well. And speaking as somebody who's now entered the well, years beyond the 55 and older limit, I know that I personally would like to live in a walkable downtown community, and I think there's a strong market for that particular occupant, and we are very comfortable in proposing it as a 55 exclusive for the main building, which would be approximately 130 of the units, and then the remaining 24 units would be non-age restricted on 2nd Avenue. And we would expect that those one-bedroom units would be attractive to a typical entry-level rental occupant. So there's a lot of positives to proposing a project of this type, and we understand that there's other concerns regarding overall development. And I would like to point out a couple of important factors as far as my perspective. This is about a 5.5 acre site. I think it's about the largest site left within what would be considered the downtown development district overlay area. I don't think there's opportunity for many more, if any, properties of this size to come along. I know there's a concern about overall development within the downtown Bayshore area. We have a very large project under construction now that was approximately 10 acres. That's the Shoregate property, which is 418 units. This project is 158. This project is on the other side of Union Boulevard, and as a result of that, it respects the fact that we are not on the south side of Union, so the density on a per unit basis, on a percentage basis, is less than what the Shoregate property is. And we feel that there's just not that much more. The balance of what could be developed within the downtown development district zoning is, if at best, small inlay properties, 20 units, 10 units, 5 units, 12 units. There's just no large parcels left that we're aware of within the downtown development district overlay area. So we feel that this would probably be one of the last that of this size and scale. But again, as I pointed out earlier, when you have 5.5 acres of desperately needed redevelopment, and that's what this parcel is, and I don't think anybody would deny it, you have options. You could propose retail, you could propose medical, you could propose industrial, you can propose another 12 pump station, gas station. There's a lot of different things you can propose. And when you look at them all in balance, and you look at the proposal that's being presented tonight, or being presented for decision tonight, I think this provides the softest and best land use for the location. And I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? No. Ms. Cruz?
I did want to say that I did like the new renderings for the 2nd Avenue to go along with the other homes in that area. It is you did improve the whole building, so I do have to say that the renderings were a big improvement. So I did like that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cruz. Mr. Moriarty?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's more of a comment than a question. It touches on some of the things you were talking about, Mr. Gargano. I do have concern. First of all, number one, I like the project. I do. I think your architectural changes were very good. I think the project overall, the site, it requires significant upgrades, and I appreciate all the work that you're doing to sort of make an effort to upgrade that portion of Bayshore, which I think is, I concede is still significantly blighted in my view. The concern I have, though, frankly, is timing. That's the only concern I have right now. I think that the town of Bayshore is absorbing a tremendous number of rental housing over the next year. I think north of 1,000 new units are coming online. I'm concerned about the infrastructure in the town, whether there's sufficient access to roadways and flow of traffic. I think parking is a continuing concern as well of mine, and I'm more concerned about that than anything else, quite frankly. So I just want to make it clear that I'm not objecting to the project, but I'm objecting to the timing of it, or I have concerns about the timing of the project, just given all of the other things going on in Bay Shore right now. And it's a significant concern of mine. So that's my view of it as well right now.
I appreciate that and I respect that concern. The way I would like to respond to that is in this way. I don't know about 1,000 units coming online because to my knowledge, the only thing that's coming online in the next, say, 24 months would be the Shoregate property, which is 418 units. And I know there's another property that is approximately 110 units that will ultimately be on track for development, say within the next year to 2 years at the Bay Shore train station. Beyond that, I'm not sure of any other large projects. And what I can say is this. In the last 6 months, I brought 2 properties online for a total of 180 units. And they were both properties that were approved. One was approved 10 or 15 years ago and never got developed. And the other one was approved about 5 or 6 years ago, and it just took a long time to get the project up and vertical and ultimately finished. Both properties came online a relatively the same time. I'm happy to say that both properties are fully leased. Our parking situations are quite different on both sites. One site has fully self-contained parking. The other site shares a portion of the municipal lot. That arrangement is working out very well. And the point I'm trying to make, I think, is that yes, there's a lot that has happened, and Shoregate represents what many people think of as a new city, as it looks its worst right now, and it'll start to scale down as the finishes go in. But this project, if it were to be approved, I could comfortably say, and unfortunately say, that a shovel would not go in the ground here for probably 24 to 36 months, only because from the time of a town board approval, which if we are fortunate enough to receive that from planning board and then ultimately town board, then we would have about another 12 months of plan preparation with our civil engineers and architects before we could even submit, and then it would probably be another 12 months before we could get a permit, and then another 18 months to build. So we're looking at a timeline that's probably 36 months out before the first tenant would actually move in. And the other projects that are either built or have been built recently, again, if you looked at them, when you look at them now, it seems very impactful. But when you look at them as over the chronology of when they were approved, there were one here and then 5 years, another one. And just economically, they all kind of came up around the same time. And the other backstop, I think, that we all have is just there's a changing environment financially, rising interest rates. That's going to slow things down a little bit. But more importantly, I just don't think there's a large opportunity left in the downtown Bay Shore area for these types of projects. But I do appreciate and respect your comments.
Thank you. Mr. Madden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I share with Mr. Moriarty the concern because there are so many things happening. However, this one, if you put them all in a row, one of the items that you mentioned is the fact that this is a senior citizen project of 130 units, which impact-wise is probably the least impactful of most of the other things together if you line them up one by one. And since you've been coming in front of us with this application, I've taken a closer look at Wayside Fence, which is a disaster appearance-wise, and it's not doing Bay Shore's image any good. So if we were to have the opportunity, which we don't, to time these things, this would be one that would probably bear more support perhaps than some of the others because it's senior citizens. So I agree with Mr. Moriarty. I think we're all in unison that we're happy with the changes you made to the architecture, which you did in record time. And but I think your comments are well taken, that it's a strong project, and we would hate to see it get away and not fulfill the intentions of the Downtown Development District, which was done back in the 80s. This certainly does that. Thank you.
Thank you. Guess I'm the last one here. So I agree with Mr. Moriarty's concerns. I first want to say I was not here for the public hearing on this, but I went back. Sean sent me the minutes from it, and I reviewed the minutes. I'm glad to see the renderings and the changes that were made that I think Ms. Cruz and Mr. Bruno raised. And I do think it is possibly one of the nicer projects, if it were to be developed, that would be in downtown Bayshore in terms of meeting the character of the community. I do share the concern, though, of what's happening in Bayshore. I think what's happened in Patchogue is sort of ruined Patchogue, in my opinion, in terms of how it's sort of overdeveloped. I think, to Mr. Moriarty's point, since 2014, my understanding is there were 1,045 units that were approved for downtown Bayshore, of which less than half have actually been completed at this point. So still more than half, 600 and change of those still have not been completed. In addition to that, I was asking Sean to pull up the numbers in terms of the south side expansion as well, which is going to add a tremendous amount to those roadways in that area. That being said, I have major concerns about not the project, about the timing of it, to see what, in fact, things were going to look like in downtown Bayshore if those other 600 units were to come online, then adding another 100 and was it 32 plus 24, so 150, 160 more units in that area. And I know that the largest project, and it's not your problem certainly, but the largest project is diagonally across the street from this project, the impact of which I don't think we fully know yet, and the hospital then would be on the other side of that. All that being said, I'm not comfortable tonight voting in favor of this, but I did go over a couple of things with Sean this evening as you were speaking and raising some good points that I wanted to go back and review with him. And my honest opinion would be, let's reserve this evening. I certainly, from my perspective, want to review that. Tonight, I would be a no vote. There's no question about that. I'm just not comfortable with the traffic concerns for the area based on the number of units that are there, the fact that there are 600 plus still outstanding that have not been developed. I don't know that I would remain a no vote after reviewing a lot of the things that Sean and I were just talking about. I think having the opportunity to review those and even sharing those with Mr. Moriarty, there might be opportunity for us to come back and possibly support it in its current form. But right now, I'm just not comfortable with the amount of units that are not online, as well as the hospital expansion, that this is right for the roadways or for the residents of Bayshore. I agree that it's blight. Something has to be done there. I was comparing the traffic statistics that came in the report, what it would be if it was a commercial use or a retail use, what it would be if it's a medical use. So I think there are some arguments there that are legitimate that may sway me a different way on this project. I think there are some concerns I have possibly with buffers and the rest, and just parking. I think you have sufficient parking there. I mean, I looked at your numbers, I looked at your calculations. The numbers are pretty close to what's being required. I don't think parking for me was not the major concern. Certainly parking in downtown Bayshore for the uses are a major concern for me, for other uses coming online with other restaurants and things like that. I think there's a lack of parking. That's not your concern. Your people would probably walk over there, which is the intent of it. So I think right now, without going through the full traffic numbers, I would not be in support of it. Having the opportunity to discuss that with Sean and possibly even yourself a little further. I was not here at the last meeting. I apologize. I was certainly out of town, so I couldn't participate. But I reviewed the minutes. I discussed with Sean. My recommendation would be to reserve decision tonight, not to have a vote that's not going to be in support of this project. I think it's a good project in terms of the way it looks and what it can do for the community. I think it can clean up that area. I understand your constraints in terms of what's going on in the finance world right now. So regardless of where I end up or where Mr. Moriarty ends up, I think you come back on the 17th, which there'll be at least two other board members here. I don't know their positions on it, but I wasn't here at the meeting. Certainly you met with Mr. Bruno and went over what he was concerned about. So you've met his, Mr. Frugieri, Mr. Brown, and three other members, I'm sorry, that are not here. But my recommendation this evening would be, rather than vote on it, let us reserve it again. Let's bring it back on the very next meeting, which is 2 weeks away, or less than 2 weeks away. It's on a Tuesday. I may reach out to you in the interim to go over some of the concerns that I have and really review those reports with Mr. Colgan and talk to Mr. Moriarty some more, and we'll come back. Again, it's not the project itself. I think it's the right area that needs to be cleaned up. I think it's an outstanding looking project. I just think changing it to DDD and allowing that type of density, what it does to the traffic is my concern, but maybe your traffic report and study that I've just, gone through a little more in detail, explain why yours is a better project than the alternatives. So I would ask for more time on that.
I appreciate that. And certainly it's an important and, complicated project, and I would encourage the board to take their time and make sure they're comfortable with every aspect of it. If I may, I'd like to just give you a couple of responses to two of the things you mentioned. First, Patchogue, which I think is an interesting conversation and comparison, and this is just from my own personal experience in the Patchogue town. When I drive through Patchogue during the day, it's a completely different experience than when I drive through Patchogue at night. And I don't know if the residential development that has occurred in the downtown Patchogue area in and of itself visually is what people say when they say Patchogue has gotten away and we don't want another Patchogue. As nice as Patchogue is and as well as that redevelopment worked. What I do notice about Patchogue is that, and it's different from what we have in Bayshore, in Patchogue there's a tremendous amount of restaurants, but almost every one of those restaurants turns into a nightclub after 10 o'clock. And when you drive into Patchogue at 10 o'clock at night, it's an impossibility to park anywhere, to navigate. It's just a whole different experience. In Bayshore, we're very fortunate. The restaurant operators have alcohol and bars as an accessory to their restaurant use. And for the most part, the majority of them at 11 o'clock at night are closed. Even on a weekend, they're winding down and closing up. And that's why I think in downtown Bayshore, it feels much different. And as long as, and I would just say this as a general statement, as new applications come in to this board for restaurant bar uses in downtown Bayshore, that's a place to focus and make sure that what's being approved is a restaurant, not a bar. And I would just say that that's something that makes a difference between the two hamlets. As far as the Southside University Hospital, great employment center, great capital expansion for our community. And yeah, it's going to require more medical space, and sites like this are either going to go apartments or medical. And I'm glad that you recognize the two choices there. And I appreciate everything you said, and I look forward to coming back on the 17th if the board is ready to speak with me. And I'm certainly available in the interim.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And certainly you're 100% correct on Bayshore. We're now facing the bar applications that are coming in to have those rooftop bars and the rest that are starting to come before us. And that's something we're looking at seriously.
Next year comes back.
Yeah, exactly. So I thank you for that. And thank you for your understanding. And I probably definitely will reach out to you the next couple of weeks before the meeting. Thank you again. Is there a motion? Mr. Moriarty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd move to close the hearing and reserve decision this evening, allow planning staff to work through some of these issues.
Thank you. There's a motion by Mr. Moriarty to reserve the decision. Is there a second? Mr. Matamoro, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Reserved. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, site plan modification decision item, Brad Lippman, SP 2021-085, southeast corner of East Main Street and Manicock Avenue, East Islip, 136 and 146 East Main Street. Applicant requests landscape and relaxation in connection with the change of use from an existing professional office to a medical office. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the applicant, Brian Kennedy with the law firm of Forcelli, Deegan, Tarana, 333 Earl Ovington Boulevard, Uniondale, New York. The applicant is before this board seeking a small modification to a previously granted landscaping relaxation. Property is located at 136 and 146 East Main Street. 136 East Main Street currently houses a vacant one-story fire damaged building. Prior to incurring that fire damage, the site housed an office building. 146 East Main Street houses two separate 1.5-story buildings, each of which contains small offices. The applicant proposes to construct a 2-story medical office at 136 East Main Street with a total square footage of 6,900 square feet and demolish the 2 existing buildings located at 146 East Main Street. The 146 East Main Street site will house parking for the newly constructed facility. Now, the applicant was before this board on May 25th of 2022 and sought a small landscaping relaxation. The plan before the board on that date provided a landscaping of 16% throughout the site, where 20% was required. After securing that requested relief, the applicant moved forward with the engineering review process, and during that process, the engineering department requested that the 7 parking stalls along the center of the parking lot be expanded in length from 19 feet to 20 feet. Now, the client has no issue meeting that request. However, that required the building to be shifted 1 foot north and increase the size of the parking lot. Therefore, the site landscaping will go from 16% to 15.4%. This change is de minimis. However, we're required to appear before you to address that modification. Now, the site still complies with all zoning and parking requirements. There are no meaningful changes from our prior application aside from that minor landscaping relaxation. My client has reviewed and executed the covenants and restrictions provided by Mr. Gonzalez, and with that, I'd welcome any questions.
I'm going to go to Mr. Gonzalez for a report. We'll come back for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Mr. Kennedy stated, this application was granted an overall landscaping relaxation to provide 16% instead of the required 20 on the May 25th, 2022 Planning Board hearing for a medical office building. Subsequently, during further site plan review, it was determined, as Mr. Kennedy stated, that the middle aisle of 7 parking stalls was being requested to increase in length an additional foot, which reduced the front yard setback of the building an additional foot. This resulted in a de minimis decrease of 185 square feet in landscaping and does not result in any adverse impact. So based on that, staff recommends the board grant the application subject to the attached conditions.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? I just have one question. If I recall this properly, by the way, I think it's fine you're doing it. It's going to look better. It's going to function better. I'm not sure if we asked at the public hearing if the dumpster could be moved closer to the building. Was that an issue that was raised or no? Am I thinking of a different project?
I'd have to go back through the minutes. One of the other site plan reviewers was at that public hearing, so I don't recall off the top of my head,
I don't
unfortunately.
believe that was requested.
Okay. So, I mean, it's certainly outside the buffer anyway. That's 25 foot, which is naturally what are up against the residential.
Yeah, so the requirement's 25 and they're holding the 25 on the south.
Okay. And the dumpster doesn't encroach on the 25.
The dumpster is outside the 25 feet and even a little bit further north of that, probably an additional 4 or 5 feet, I would say.
Any further questions from the board? Anything further from the applicant?
No, thank you.
Is there a motion? Mr. Moriarty.
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion to grant the application subject to the conditions which have been agreed to by the applicant.
There's a motion by Mr. Moriarty to grant the application subject to the conditions. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Cruz. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? The application is granted. Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Last item on the agenda, Town Board application, public hearing, Costco Wholesale Corporation as successor by merger to Price Corporation, CZ 2022-030, northeast corner of Beacon Drive and Sunrise Highway, State Route 27, Holbrook, 125 Beacon Drive. Applicant requests a modification of covenants and restrictions associated with TC 5286 to decrease the landscaped area along Beacon Drive in order to expand an existing single-use bulk retail establishment by 18,372 square feet. Site plan modifications are required as part of this application. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Philip Butler with Farrell Fritz for the applicant.
Do you want to make a presentation or write to a staff report?
I don't have anything to add from the last presentation last time I was here. I will note that we worked through the proposed covenants with Sean. They're acceptable to my client, and we've agreed to pay the mitigation fee requested by the town. Apart from that, I have nothing new to report.
Let me go to Mr. Colgan, and then we'll come back for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This application was heard and reserved at the November 30th hearing. It was reserved to review and go over the landscaping mitigation fee, which we determined should come out to $83,345. Based on that mitigation and the preservation of the mature trees, and that no significant adverse impacts are anticipated with the expansion, the staff recommends that the board grant the modification subject to the attached covenants and restrictions.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Anything further from the applicant?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair? Yeah, I'd make a motion to grant the application subject to the conditions. Have those been agreed to by the applicant?
Yes, they have.
They have, okay, subject to the agreed to conditions.
It's a motion by Mr. Moriarty to grant the application subject to the covenants and restrictions. Is there a second? second by Ms. Cruz. All in favor? Opposed, abstentions, application is granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
In record time, is there a motion to adjourn? Motion by Mr. Matamore, second by Ms. Cruz. All in favor? Opposed, abstentions, we're adjourned. Thank you.